game experience. This tends to be a little bit trickier for people to understand compared to like mechanics and gameplay. Because like one thing, if you think about it, with mechanics we can kind of see those and decide those, and they're kind of like set in stone rules of the things, rules of how the things interact with the other things, and the rules of the things in the environment or whatever, or the sizes of the things. Like that's all kind of set in stone. Versus the game experience, now we're trying to dive into the player's head. Now we're dealing with humans. We're trying to think, okay, like what is the human experiencing? And then not only that, but us as game designers, what do we want the human to experience? With these lessons, we're going to focus a little bit more about game experience, and we're going to look at, well, how, as a game designer, how do you actually create the experience that you want? How have other game designers done that? As a brief review, here's our definition of game experience. So remember, it's how the game impacts the player and how the player interprets the game. Like, what are they doing in the game? Are they like a SWAT team member trying to stop terrorists or something? Or what does the player feel like they're doing in the game? Also, of course, includes the motivation the player has to play the game. Are they doing it because they want to play with their friends, so it's kind of like a social co-op type of thing? Or are they competing against others? We, of course, have the feeling that the player gets. That's definitely game experience. The type of tone that you want your game to have, so simulation, scary, humor, examples. Theme. Very important is that the mechanics should relate somehow to the theme, and that, of course, helps create the experience. Then, of course, there's visuals, whether, let's say, they're realistic or cartoony, stylized, whatever. And then, of course, the sound design. All this stuff here helps create the experience. And then, if you notice in red here, not only all this stuff here, but also the mechanics and gameplay. And that should, of course, connect to your vision, which that's going to be the challenge for you when you're designing your games. You're thinking of what do you want your players to experience, and then trying to make all these decisions to help create that experience. Before you even start making decisions about the style, the sound design, the types of mechanics you want, the gameplay, but you got to like think through, okay, well, who am I designing this game for? And like what kind of skill level are they going to have? Am I designing this game for, let's say, 8-year-olds, and mainly only 8-year-olds and younger? So the game should probably be maybe a little bit more stylized, not very real, not simulation, a little bit easier to pick up in terms of the mechanics. Or am I designing the game for like a hardcore teenager gamer that's played a lot of games and they need a lot more challenge? They need games where they're going to have a lot more player choice. There's going to be more strategy, risk versus reward type stuff, maybe less luck and more skill. Or am I going to design it for a game that's going to work really well for the family? So there needs to be enough player choice and skill in that game that adults will still connect with it, but it needs to be simple enough that the younger children can also enjoy themselves and have a chance at winning. A game that I feel like would connect well with this scenario would be something like, like Mario Kart. There's still enough mechanics in Mario Kart to challenge adults and have fun. The biggest question we're going to address in this lesson is really thinking about how do mechanics and gameplay affect the experience. We're going to try and answer, how do the experiences in iRacing, Wreckfest, and Mario Kart compare? In all three of these games, here's some ways that they're all the same. So you're racing vehicles on the track. That's the main mechanic. That's the main goal. You're driving around some sort of vehicle on a track. There's, of course, a multiplayer aspect that you're racing against, or you can race against other people. You can choose your vehicle, multiple vehicles to choose from. The first one to the finish wins in all three of these games. That's, of course, the core mode is you're racing. First one past the finish line wins. There's multiple tracks you can choose and race on. All the vehicles have like steering, brakes, acceleration. Some of the more recent Mario Karts might not have brakes. I don't remember, but I know some of the older ones did. If you are not familiar with, if there's one of these here you're not familiar with, I recommend you pause this lesson and just go on YouTube, watch a little bit of gameplay. You'll probably get the idea in like a minute or two for all three of these games. Just look them up, check them out. So iRacing, that's overall very realistic type racing type game. And then Wreckfest, that's like kind of the goal. You're smashing each other up as you're driving, so the damage, there's a big focus on the damage of your vehicle. And then Mario Kart, I know a lot of you are familiar with Mario Kart, but that's where you can get like items. You're on these fantasy tracks, and you get items and shoot items at each other and take each other out that way. Control and physics. There's all kinds of programming. There's all kinds of rules. So when you're coding a game, when you're like making a video game, programming and typing in values for these numbers, like that's in a way that's just rules. Like So board game has rules. Well, video games have rules too. It's just in the code. We don't actually see those a lot. So controls in physics, all kinds of different rules, mechanics that have to go with control in physics. In iRacing, it's like as real as possible. You need a steering wheel to be able to like even do a decent job. If you're using like a joystick, just like with your thumb, it's very difficult to control the cars because of just how precise you need to be. Like if you do, in a lot of racing games, if you push, let's say, the joystick to the far left, you'll be fine. The car just turns left. But in like iRacing, that would be the equivalent of turning your steering wheel around all the way, and the car, like, it won't do it. It'll spin out. So it's like you have to be so sensitive if you're using the joystick. You essentially need a steering wheel. Braking, accelerating, like depending on how you brake or accelerate, that can disrupt the car and you can spin out. If you give it full acceleration, you can be spinning tires. Or if you try to accelerate out of a corner, you can spin out very easily. Same thing like with braking. If you push the brakes, if you give it full brakes, they can lock up, and then your car can slide around and have issues. And it's just like you have to be so sensitive and particular with all your control inputs to really control that car. And not only just that, but the timing of when you do those inputs. So that's where a game like iRacing, the driving skill, it's incredibly important. And that's the most important part of the game, is that driving skill and building that skill and practicing it and putting that skill, your skill, up against others. And then Wreckfest, so there's definitely some simulation there in terms of like you have to still be careful with your accelerating. You still have to be careful with your steering, but it's adjusted more towards fun than realism. And so it's still challenging, and you can still slide the cars around, but you still have pretty good control. And a lot of these tracks are like dirt, so in real life you just like spin the tires like crazy. But in Wreckfest, the game is overall pretty forgiving, and it lets you still have tons of fun. So that's where I'd say the core, like, main thing of Wreckfest is interacting with other vehicles. That's what's most important in the game, because you're really using your vehicle to smash into other cars, and you got all this cool damage, and trying to position yourself to not let people pass you and so on. And then Mario Kart, so a very cartoony type feel. You can give your kart full throttle going around a corner, and it's not gonna spin out. And like brakes, like I think in the modern ones you don't even use brakes, and then even the older Mario Karts, you like never need to even use the brakes. Versus like iRacing, like you couldn't imagine if you told somebody in iRacing to say, and you told them, you said, hey, for this track you can't use your brakes, they'd be looking at you like you're crazy, because like braking in real racing is like the most important thing. In Mario Kart, full throttle the whole time, like almost, like even around corners, iRacing, you'd be spinning out. And then what's most important about Mario Kart is not as much about your driving skill, but it's more so just that the people that are playing, that they're having a fun time. That's kind of the real big focus of Mario Kart, is they want everybody that's playing to be able to have a fun time. So that's kind of so I want you to be able to, again, think about that. So the mechanics to give this cartoony type feel. So like the tires, if we just think tires, in Mario Kart, the numbers or the values or the rules about tires is those tires are going to have much more grip. Let's say we did a rating 0 through 100. Well, in Mario Kart, when we're programming Mario Kart, the tires have a grip of, let's say, 98. So they can slip a little bit. Versus in iRacing, let's say the tires have a grip of 25 out of 100. And then in Wreckfest, maybe they have a rating of 50 out of 100. So that's kind of like how you can adjust mechanics in these games when you're programming them, is adjust values like that, or like gravity, or if you turn the wheel or push the joystick, how fast do you turn or how hard do you turn. So that's, again, kind of all focusing on just the physics aspect of how you can make these games. They really feel so different. Here's some other things to consider, other mechanics and features to consider in these games. Again, you're thinking about by adding in some of these or removing them, you can completely change the experience. So in Mario Kart, you can use items to impact the race. You can hit one of those question mark boxes, get a red shell, and the red shell heat seeks and hits the person in front of you, right? Like, so imagine doing that in Wreckfest. Imagine in Wreckfest or iRacing, your car can shoot this big red shell and it hits the person in front of you. Like, that would completely change the experience. It would essentially ruin it. It would take you out of the game. It just wouldn't feel right. And then other cartoony power-ups on the tracks. So like in Mario Kart, there might be like sometimes there's those arrows that point forward, and they're kind of like a boost and like a ramp. So those types of things, like in real life, there's not going to be a yellow arrow that you can drive on that's going to make your car go faster. That's not how real life works. But in a cartoony type game, that's okay, and we want to do stuff like that. Also, the races are pretty short. They're like 3 or 4 laps, and those laps are pretty brief. So you're changing the experience by doing shorter races to try and meet the attention span of those more casual or younger type players. Now, Wreckfest pretty cool. Again, you should watch some video of Wreckfest. Some of the Wreckfest has like stylized or extreme tracks. So like sometimes there's like loops. So like in real life, we're probably not going to have a track with a loop. But again, Wreckfest, it's like a fun real life. So it's trying to give you that experience of like a stylized real life. So you got these extreme big jumps and loops and stuff like that. You can customize the style of your car. That's an important part of the game, and then you can also upgrade your vehicle's parts. So you can win money, you can upgrade parts. So those are some important aspects of this game. So as an experience, if the designer is like, hey, I want the person to feel connected to their car, or I want them to feel connected and feel like they're really building their racing team or whatever, they're rising up through the ranks, starting with a kind of a weak car, and then they can kind of upgrade it. That's something that the designers wanted to have. iRacing, there's like endless adjustments with all kinds of stuff, like even like the gear ratios. I think you can adjust the ratio of every single gear in the transmission. The suspension settings, not only just say, I want it like soft or stiff, like so in Wreckfest, it's just a slider. You can slide, I want the suspension soft or stiff. But in iRacing, you don't only do that, you actually can adjust the camber, meaning the angle of the wheel, and like the amount of degrees matters, and you can feel that as a player. It's like, oh man, it's overwhelming. You have to know a decent amount about cars to really, I guess, get into and dive into that adjustment type stuff. But again, that's the type of experience that the designers wanted this game to have. It's simulation. It's simulating what is it really like to have a race car. There's definitely no track shortcuts. So in iRacing, you can't use a power up like a mushroom and go over a big ramp and then boom, you got a shortcut. That doesn't happen in iRacing. Versus Mario Kart, there's of course shortcuts. Not all the races are hours long, of course. There's short races, decently short races in iRacing. They definitely take longer than Mario Kart usually. But like, there's races that I think they could probably do 24-hour long races. But there's definitely like 3-hour race. That's not unheard of. That's pretty regular, I think, in iRacing. But so there's some long races. Again, the experience is they're trying to make decisions about the mechanics to try and make people that want that really kind of simulation type experience. Let's think about damage in these 3 games. In Mario Kart, there's really no damage. There's endless health. No matter how many times you spin out or crash, your kart goes back on the track and you keep going. And again, that's catering or trying to create an experience that's enjoyable for those younger players or less kind of skilled players or casual players. Because it wouldn't be very fun for them if their kart, one time it crashes and then it's game over for them and they can't continue. And that's where the damage only results, when you crash your kart, it only results in you having a little time delay. It doesn't make your kart slower. It just, you got a little time delay to get back on the track and then you keep going. In Wreckfest, the damage, it's very realistic looking. It's kind of beautiful just how well they did it. But it doesn't, it's more visual than it is mechanical in terms of it doesn't affect the car and how it drives as much. And in a way that the cars kind of have health. They almost have like a health meter or number. And once you get to 0, of course the car will be done. Once you crash so much that your car's health gets to 0, the car is dead. You can adjust the settings, so you can adjust. It might take a lot of crashes in terms of getting your car damaged. And sometimes like things happen where like you steer a little crooked because you hit a wall. But it's usually not, it takes a good amount of damage to cause that. Versus in iRacing, you could be racing and hit somebody's bumper, and now your car could be done for the rest of the track because you had a light tap, which then changed the geometry of your suspension and messed up the rim, and now or the angle of it, and now you can't really steer. So and again, some of those settings I think you can turn on, but the point is it's very punishing. And then with iRacing, there's no really visual damage, I think, at least at the time of this recording. I can't remember if they're putting it in or not. So that's kind of like saying, hey, you guys can smash and you hit your car, and we're not going to give you all this fancy visual damage, because that's not the priority of our game. The priority of our game is how the cars handle and feel. We're not as worried about the fluffy visual stuff. And that's where then I'd add again, iRacing, there's no fluff. It's just kind of, you pick your stuff, you go in and race. It's not super stylized. It's just very realistic. The tracks are real life tracks. I think they're going out. I don't know if they use lasers to kind of measure the tracks, but they're real life tracks that they go on. They might have some fake ones too. And then I don't think there's any music from what I remember. Whereas Wreckfest, you think about Wreckfest, so again, watch some videos of it. Energetic soundtrack. I think there's some different rock type music, and just kind of keeps the energy going. And the visuals are overall pretty realistic, but overall stylized too. Like even like the menus, like you'll be going through the menus and they'll like swipe and go around. You got this rock music. So again, the experience that the designers wanted the players to have, you can tell like they wanted them to have kind of like exciting, smash these cars up, it's fun, it's crazy type experience, versus iRacing's like go in, race. And like Mario Kart, that's like cartoony, like pleasant and fun in terms of the visuals and sound. You know, it's not realistic. It's you got Rainbow Road, that track that has like all the lights, like you're basically riding on these lit up track. And the sound effect and music, it's very kind of happy and fun, because again, that's the experience that they want the players to have. So again, thinking about this, how do mechanics and gameplay affect the experience? Well, again, adjusting values, adding mechanics, or removing mechanics can totally change the experience of a game. So I have some questions here for you. How would iRacing be different if you could shoot shells out of your car? How would Mario Kart be different if there were not items to shoot or use? How would Wreckfest be different if the cars did not show any damage? How would Mario Kart be different if after being hit by one item, your kart was done and you could no longer race? How would all of these games be different if the acceleration was tripled? Again, the acceleration, it's coded in. The designers, they could just somehow increase the values and triple the acceleration. So how would it be different if they did that? And then how would the games be different if the tires had half the grip? These are, again, all things you got to think about as a designer, that adjusting the values on these different things or pulling stuff out of the game or adding stuff in can dramatically change the experience of the game. All of this needs to relate. And what are your design goals? Who is this game for? What kind of experience do you want them to have? Let's look at another comparison. So think about games like first-person shooters. There's all kinds of them out there. Very popular genre. First-person military shooter. Of course, you got your character, you're running around, and you're trying to defeat the enemy. Imagine if your goal was that you wanted to design a more team-focused, military-based first-person shooter. So what kind of mechanics will create that type of experience? Now, if you think about this, there's like endless amount of military first-person shooters out there. Some of them, of course, kind of cater to a little bit more teamwork type style. So let's think about, well, why? What causes that? So let's look at these two examples. We're going to kind of look a little bit closer at a game like Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Again, some of this might have changed with some of the modern Call of Duties that have come out, and then just the Battlefield series in general. So we're just kind of looking at these series in general. Call of Duty, just kind of look at it a general multiplayer mode. They don't really have classes for characters, so there's no medics. So because you don't have medics, then you can't revive somebody. That means like if you have a person go down, you can't shock paddle them or whatever to get them back up. The respawn time is usually pretty short. Sometimes it's like instant. As soon as you die, boom, you're back in the game. And respawns, where you respawn on the map, it's usually kind of like a random spot, or it's kind of always in the same spot. And then the objectives, so like if you're defusing something or controlling an area, or a lot of times that stuff can be handled as a solo player. And then the rounds, the map is usually like time based. Maybe you have like a certain amount of time. Whoever gets the highest score in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Or maybe it's objective based. Like I said, you got to defuse the thing, and then the round ends once you defuse the thing. So those are some basic mechanics that we might find in a game like Call of Duty versus like the Battlefield series. So now in the Battlefield series, they have different classes of characters. They might have a character that gives out ammo, and then of course there's a medic character. And the medic character, when a teammate goes down, the medic character can go over by their buddy and bring them back up alive into the game. When your character does die, then a lot of times in Battlefield you have a longer wait to respawn. So instead of like Call of Duty, which might be only a couple seconds, sometimes Battlefield it might be like 30 seconds or 20 seconds, or like some of these games are sometimes a minute or even longer. One thing that's kind of neat in a game like Battlefield is you can be in a squad. Let's say you can be in a small group. You have a big team of, let's say, 50 people, but you can be in a squad of like 5 to 8 people, and you can respawn on your squad mates. Another thing to think about is objectives are captured quicker when more teammates are present. So if you're trying to raise a flag, that flag can go up faster if you have more teammates in the area. Another thing to think about, another rule, round length, it's not based on time, it's based on teams' tickets. So when you have two teams facing off each other, each team, let's say, just starts with 100 tickets, and each time a character dies, it removes a ticket from the team. So one way you can win the game is once you defeat all of your team's tickets. You get their 100 tickets down to 0. So thinking about this from a design aspect, if you want players to play as a team, how can you guide them to do so? I don't want to necessarily say force, but how can you give them incentive to play as a team? Or how can you guide them to play as a team? How can you, if that's what you truly want them to do, you need to, like, people, they're just not going to go do that. Like, you have to put in things in your game to kind of guide them to what do you want them to do or experience. Because if your argument is, I think games are more fun when you play as a team, well then you want to incentivize those people to play as a team and guide them towards that. So let's take a look at a couple of these mechanics and think about, well, which ones incentivize people to play as a team. If you just alone, this one rule of having a medic class, allowing you to revive your teammate, that alone gives players to kind of play a little bit more teamwork. For example, you got characters running around, and now they're going to communicate with a little bit with each other. Like, okay, I'm going to go this way, and you're going to stay kind of close to me, and you're going to go that way. And if I go down, revive me. Boom, and then they do it. So that rule alone, and having different classes. Now, not only that, but even this respawn. Think about this. If in Battlefield let's say there wasn't a respawn timer. Let's say your character goes down, you can respawn right away. Boom. Then there's almost no point of having the medic. Then that medic class is useless. But by making that small little detail of that rule of how long the respawn time is, now the longer that respawn time is, the more important that medic becomes. So if now your respawn time is a minute, man, if that player goes out and doesn't get revived, they're waiting a minute to get back into the game. That's a long time in a game like this. But if they can get revived, boom, they're back in the game. Versus like something like Call of Duty, it's just your character goes down, boom, you're back in. Respawning on your squad mates, that causes a lot of teamwork because now you're trying to position your squad mates in certain areas, and maybe the squad leader, you can only respawn on the squad leader. So now that squad leader is communicating and trying to be careful where they are, and the medic's making sure they're respawning the squad leader. Objectives quicker, captured quicker. Now it's kind of like, now you're communicating based on strategy. You want to try and raise that flag faster with 4 people around it. So now you're communicating and grouping together to go do that, and then you're reviving each other while you're doing it, and so on. And then a team, a round based on tickets, the round being the whole like level or round or map being based on tickets. Well, now it's a whole team effort. It's not just a squad, but it's the whole team is like all wrapped up in trying to revive each other and really try to reduce the amount of tickets that you'd say are bleeding or the tickets that are being lost. What I wanted you to see in this example is just how these little changes can really completely alter the experience of the game. And it all kind of starts with the mechanics. I have one last example for you. So I want you to think about, like, let's say you wanted to design a fast-paced, highly athletic, team-based game involving tossing an object into a goal/hole. What are the? I'm gonna give you a couple examples, and which one is going to create that experience. So, like, think about what kind of sports or physical activities involve tossing like an object into a goal. There's all kinds of them. You got hockey, you got soccer, you got basketball, and you got beanbag toss. Well, so obviously maybe one of these doesn't quite meet our goal, but let's first look at, well, how are these games similar? What mechanics or rules do they have that are similar? They're both tossing an object into a goal or a hole, and you do that multiple times, and when you get the thing in the goal or the hole, that awards points. Another way that's similar is that there's different points awarded for different scenarios. Both of the games up to 3 points. It's actually team-based. Both of these games are team-based. And then another thing that's similar is that the hole is really not much bigger than the thrown object. So the ball is pretty close to the same size as the hole there, and the beanbag is pretty close to the same size as the hole there. Another thing is there's actual skill involved in both of these games. So tossing a beanbag in a hole it requires skill. Getting the ball in the hoop, that requires skill, and there's all kinds of different strategies to do it. Versus beanbag, maybe you do the spin method, where you get the beanbag spinning around. That's one type of strategy, maybe a high arc, low arc, I don't know, whatever. And then basketball, a strategy or a skill is just putting backspin on the ball as you shoot it. So we established that these games, in a way, have many similarities. You're tossing a thing into a hole, it's team-based, all that kind of stuff. But I want it to be fast-paced and highly athletic. So which of these mechanics are going to more so result in that experience? So let's take a look here. In beanbag toss, players take turns and must stay behind the line. When you're tossing it, you must stay behind the line. Versus in basketball, players can move anywhere within the play area, so they're kind of moving around and so on. In beanbag toss, running and jumping is not required to be successful. You don't see grandma and grandpa or your aunt, parents jumping to throw the beanbag. That would be kind of silly. But in basketball, running and jumping is definitely required to be successful. Passing in beanbag toss is not allowed. So I can't go to my partner that's across the other side and like, hey, catch it, Johnny. I'm throwing it to Johnny. Johnny catches it, and then he can boop, put it into the hole. That's not allowed, versus passing is allowed in basketball. So because of that, that causes more movement. In beanbag toss, there's not a shot clock. And if there was, your family would, like, if you say, hey, Mom and Dad, we're going to have a shot clock in beanbag toss, they'd probably get very mad at you. No, it's kind of a chill game. Like, you're chatting while you're playing, versus in basketball, there is a shot clock. It's supposed to be fast-paced. You only have 24 seconds or 30, I don't remember what it is, 30 seconds, whatever, before you got to shoot the ball. Otherwise, you get a penalty. So that ball's got to keep moving, and you got to shoot. For the whole game, there is no timer in beanbag toss. Going slow is often encouraged. Again, it's kind of a chill game. You don't set the timer, okay, 5 minutes, then the game's got to end. But in basketball, there is a timer. Again, trying to keep things fast-paced. Because that timer's there, you're trying, as your team's trying to score as many as possible within that time, and the highest score wins. Beanbag toss, you can't be throwing elbows, you can't jump and block or push. Contact with the other player is not allowed. And imagine if you did that to your family members. You're pushing them or like standing by them like this or something while they're playing beanbag toss. They'd be looking at you like you're crazy. But in basketball, you can do that kind of stuff. And there's rules about how hard you can push people. You get fouls and you get extra throws for doing that. If you do foul somebody, that person can get some extra throws. Beanbag toss. Your heart is probably not pumping super fast because you're not moving a whole lot, and significant body strength is not needed. You're not boxing somebody out. You're not jumping super high or running super fast. There is skill, of course, involved, but you're only really practicing one movement or skill, and that's most people are doing underhand toss. So that's one movement or skill that they're practicing. Versus in basketball, you got to have cardio. You're running up and down. Like, to be effective, you have to have good cardio. You have to have good strength, too, because if you're trying to push people around a little bit or get the ball or jump high enough, even to like shoot a far enough shot, you need a decent amount of strength. And there's all kinds of other skills involved, not only just shooting, but in terms of your distance shooting, if you're dunking, layupping, dribbling, passing, the strategy of what to do when. There's just, there's so much more complexity in basketball. So again, these mechanics, the mechanics cause the experience. We can start out with some similar stuff, but once we start changing some different mechanics, that can really modify an experience. And that's kind of the point I wanted you to get this lesson. I hope you found this interesting, and this was kind of one of our first steps here of looking into how do mechanics and gameplay, all these little decisions, really impact the experience of a game.